The Valais Trials of 1428 are the first event in Switzerland and Europe in which the accusation of sorcery led to systematic persecution, with hundreds of victims executed. Hi, welcome to another episode of A Witch Lives There. I am your host, Izzy Naylor. I'm a singer-songwriter, but I am enthusiastic about witches. Some may say it is my special interest. This is a podcast all about witchy things, not specifically teaching witchy things because I don't think I'm qualified for that, but discussing witchy things, perhaps history of witchy things. You know what I mean? I recently took a little trip, a little holiday with my parents and my boyfriend, and we went to the Alps, which sounds super fancy. I feel like I'm such an alpine fan, like the mountains, the trees, the architecture. I love it. So I thought, I wonder if there have ever been any witch trials in alpine history. There's folklore, of course, that always is in sort of mountain places. But I thought, these little towns and villages might be a little further out from normal society in the past. I mean, it takes a long time to get up the mountain in a car, so I cannot imagine what it would be like walking or using like horses or donkeys or like broomsticks, for instance. Actually, broomsticks would be kind of fast. I can see why they might be witches if they lived there. So I went on the internet, the World Wide Web, www, and searched for alpine witch trials, and I found an interesting one. I found one that I got sucked into the rabbit hole. It was a shallow rabbit hole because there's not much on it, but it's super interesting witch trial case. So that is what we're talking about today. So I will warn you before I start to talk about this trial, there are parts of this that you might find upsetting or unsettling. It's understandable. This is a witch trial. They were not good usually, but please be warned before you listen ahead. Witch trials are a violent and unfortunate part of our history. They're mostly prominent in Western or Christian cultures past, and some of these trials are perhaps the most notable events from like the 1600s. At least they're the most notable events that happened then for someone like me who's not a historian and didn't study history after year 9. So if someone says, tell me something important and historical that happened in the 1600s, I would most likely say witch trials. Even though, were the Tudors, was that the Tudor era? No. Was it? I don't know. See? But even further back than the 17th century, Europe was already involved in condemning and killing witches. I spoke about the first witch, Alice Kittler, in my first episode of this, and that was way, way before. But in 1428, the Valais Witch Trials began, and these trials are widely considered to be the first witch trials in Europe. So to give a little context on the area that we're talking about, this is Valais, or more formally, it's known as the Canton of Valais. It's one of the 26 cantons that form the Swiss Confederation. It hasn't always been, but this is how we know of it now. It's the third largest of these, with an area of around 5,224 kilometres, and it borders Italy to the south and France to the west. The nature of the area is stunning. It's covered in beautiful mountain pasture, glaciers and forest, and has at least 50 peaks, including the famous Matterhorn. And no, I'm not talking about the Matterhorn ride at Disneyland that rattles your brain around and makes you feel like, Am I going to survive this? No, it's a real mountain in Switzerland. The area was originally called Valais Ponina, which I'm definitely not pronouncing correctly, but we move. But that means Upper Rhone Valley, because the area includes the valley of the Upper Rhone River from its source at the Rhone Glacier down to its mouth on Lake Geneva. In the year 999, Valais was granted by King Rudolph III of Burgundy to the Bishop of Sion. The political atmosphere at the time in that area was tumultuous. So with this shaky history of patriots struggling against episcopal overlords and later the failed Protestantization during the Reformation, Valais attitudes were rooted in political upheaval. So this political upheaval, bad times, shaky grounds, is the foundation on which these witch trials stand. Though history whispers of the occasional burning of witches in Switzerland since the beginning of the 15th century, the Valais trials of 1428 are the first event in Switzerland and Europe in which the accusation of sorcery led to systematic persecution with hundreds of victims executed. It all began in Val d'Anivier and Val d'Aron, but by the summer of 1428, the whole of Valais was affected. Delegates from several different districts demanded investigations into any accused witches or sorcerers. So, on the 7th of August of that year, the authorities in Loc issued a formal proclamation that if any single person was accused of witchcraft by more than 3 people, or by more than 2 of the adjudged sorcerers, they were to be arrested and imprisoned, even if the accused was a member of nobility. If the accused confessed, they were to be burned at the stake, and if they denied the claims, they would be tortured until they admitted to heresy. An excerpt by P.G. Maxwell Stewart in Witch Beliefs and Witch Trials in the Middle Ages. Torture would be used on victims slandered by 5, 6, or 7 or more persons, up to the number of 10, who were qualified to do so and not under suspicion themselves. The Valais Witch Trials aren't as well documented as the more famous trials around the world. The most notable account that we have of the event is a short report from 1430 by Johannes Frund, who was the local clerk of the court. According to Frund's chilling account, the victims were accused of murder, heresy, and sorcery, and being in pact with the devil. The devil would appear as a black beast, such as a bear or a ram, and would demand tribute be paid to him, asking his followers to avoid Holy Mass and confession. Frund also relates that some of the accused were tortured to death without ever confessing to any crimes. However, others did confess to a variety of evil deeds, such as causing lameness, blindness, madness, miscarriage, impotence, infertility, and even killing and eating their own children. Frund's account even alluded to a more modern or conventional depiction of witches that we know of flying witches. They would apparently apply a salve to their chairs and ride through the sky wherever they wanted. There was also a witch Sabbath, where the witches would meet in people's cellars at night and drink their wine. They would listen to anti-Christian sermons performed by the devil in the form of a schoolmaster. They would then enact a sort of mock confession where they would confess any good deeds that they might have done. Apparently, some of these witches were even werewolves. They would kill livestock while in the shape of a wolf. And some of them also knew the recipe of an invisibility potion. Other accused witches confessed to ruining crops of wine and grain and causing livestock to give no milk. The Valais Witch Trials continued for several more years, persisting well into the 1430s. And while we don't know an exact number of victims claimed in the trials, it is thought to range in the hundreds. Frund spoke of a conspiracy of more than 700 witches, and of those, more than 200 had been burned within the first 2 years of the trial. Unlike in later European and global witch trials, when the majority of those accused were women, the victims in Valais are estimated to have been predominantly men, being 2/3 male and only 1/3 female. So this wasn't just hatred towards women or a fear of a woman having independence. This was a deeper rooted issue, probably caused by all the political unrest at the time. The hysteria and persecution that began in Val d'Anivier and Val d'Arène eventually petered out in 1447 after almost 20 years of ongoing witch trials. Yet the fear persisted and spread further through the continent. Though what happened in Valais may not have been the biggest or most well-documented witch trial in history, it was the first of the systemic campaigns against witches in Europe and initiated the period of witch trials that would go on to claim thousands of lives. So that's the history of the Valais witch trials. There were probably some more, maybe smaller witch trials throughout the Alps. Considering what happened in Valais spread, they were like right next to France, right next to Italy, and that hysteria kind of went across to other communities. And because this witch trial is so scarcely documented, I doubt many others would have been. I don't know if that's just because of the area that it's in, kind of seeming a bit more cut off. I've not been to the exact area that this all happened, but I've been to Geneva and Wengen in Switzerland, and also this one water park that my brother and I used to really like as kids. And one time we got in an argument and my parents said, well, we're not going to the water park if you keep arguing. And we were like, they'll never go through with that. Like, we can still go to the water park. So we continued to argue. And then they said, right, well, we're not going to the water park. And we didn't. And we were really sad about it. And I've never forgotten. Did it stop us arguing in the future? No. But that is my personal experience of Switzerland. The towns and resorts in the Alps are beautiful places, surrounded by all of this nature and the natural beauty. There's streams running everywhere, there's waterfalls, there's all these open fields, beautiful snow-capped mountains. So you can kind of see why it would be a place that a witch might want to be. And you can also see why, unfortunately, back in the 1400s, they might have viewed it as a bad thing. Whether it was political unrest that led people to not trust their neighbours so much and be a little suspicious, or maybe it's just to do with religion being so important at the time, or maybe there were people practicing magic. But whatever the reason for the trials, they definitely created this sort of snowball effect, this avalanche, if you will, that led to all of these other witch hunts and witch trials in Europe. Thank you for listening to this podcast or watching the video if you're watching from YouTube. This wasn't the longest episode because, like I said, there's not much documented on this, but I think the smaller, lesser-known witch trials can be just as valuable to know about. I mean, this one definitely was a catalyst. And in my research of this, I found a French witch trial. I found maybe some other lesser-known witch trials that I would love to talk about. So if you've got any witch trials you might know of, please get in contact with me. You can email me at awitchlivestherepod@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from you. This year, I would like to go on a few road trips, day trips to places around the UK that have had witch trials or have witchy history. So those episodes might take a little longer to come up with and edit and research because I really want to put everything into them. And speaking of witch trials, the most famous one I would say is Salem, and I'm going there at the end of this year. So that's very exciting. So I won't be covering that one until October, but I'm very excited about it. So in the meantime, I'll be talking about all other witchy things. I would love to talk about like Stevie Nicks being a witch. I mean, even the city that I'm in right now has a lot of witchy history. I mean, this whole county has a lot of witchy history, so that's very exciting. But thank you for spending time with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And for now, I will make sure to not ruin your crops so that you can come back for the next episode. And if you don't, then I might have to ruin your crops of wine and grain. That's just the way these things work. I don't make the rules. So you should come back so that you have good wine and good grain. Bye.